The conference hall lights were hotter than Dante Blackwood expected, 3,000 faces dissolving into a blur of anticipation and judgment. His hands gripped the podium edges, anchoring himself to something solid, while the projection screen behind him displayed two photographs side by side. Left image: a black man in his mid-30s thrift store suit, worn at the elbows, standing in a corporate lobby with shoulders slightly hunched. The timestamp read 8:47 a.m., and the defeated posture told its own story about what was coming next. Right image: the same man 1 year later, navy suit sharp enough to command respect, standing at this very podium with his chin lifted and eyes clear. Different universe, same person. Dante's throat tightened as he looked out at the sea of technology executives and engineers who'd paid premium conference fees to hear him speak about innovation and leadership. What they didn't know yet was that this wasn't going to be another comfortable discussion about disruption and market dynamics. This was going to be surgery without anesthesia. Thank you for that introduction. His voice carried better than he'd expected, years of speaking to Zara at bedtime giving him practice in projection. They asked me to talk about crisis management and technological solutions today. He paused, letting the silence stretch until discomfort began to settle over the audience. But I want to tell you about the morning I became invisible. The screen changed. White text on black background, stark and accusatory, 14 rejections, 8 months, $823 in the bank. One decision that changed everything. In row 17, a woman's face went pale. Cassandra Sterling shifted in her seat, arms crossing defensively, as she recognized where this was heading. Dante's eyes found hers for half a second, acknowledgement passing between them that this conversation was going to hurt. 1 year ago, I walked into Cortex Systems for my 14th job interview in 8 months. Dante's hands released the podium, his posture straightening as he delivered the opening that would set the tone for everything that followed. 14 companies. 14 different ways of saying the same thing. You're not what we're looking for. The screen flashed again, showing a worn spiral notebook pages filled with handwritten timestamps and interviewer names. The camera had captured enough detail that sharp-eyed audience members could read the pattern Dante had documented across 13 failed interviews. What they really meant was, you don't fit our comfortable assumptions about who belongs here. Dante let that land before continuing, his voice dropping into the measured cadence of someone about to tell a story that mattered. Let me take you back. Let me show you what invisible actually looks like. The lights dimmed as the timestamp appeared 8 months earlier, 4:15 a.m., Seattle, Washington. The alarm's digital scream pulled Dante from something that couldn't be called sleep. 4:15 in the morning, and Seattle's darkness pressed against his apartment windows with the weight of all the failures that had brought him to this moment. His hand found the button through muscle memory, silencing the noise before it could wake Zara. The silence that followed felt oppressive, filled with the building's night sounds. Mrs. Patterson's television bleeding through thin walls. Someone's pipes rattling. A car alarm wailing 2 blocks away before dying into nothing. Dante lay still, staring at a ceiling he couldn't see, listening to his own breathing and trying to remember when mornings had felt like possibility instead of punishment. The answer was simple: 8 months ago, before InnoData's acquisition and the relocation requirement that forced him to choose between career and daughter. He'd chosen Zara. The job market had made him pay for that choice every single day since. The pull-out couch groaned when he sat up, metal bar that pressed into his spine, a constant reminder of everything he couldn't provide. This shoebox apartment, with its single bedroom that Zara occupied while he made do with furniture that stopped folding properly 6 months ago. The building manager had promised to fix it. That promise had the same value as interview callbacks that never materialized. Kitchen lights revealed the bills spread across the small table exactly where he'd left them last night. Dante had arranged them in order of urgency, a system that created the illusion of control over circumstances that were rapidly spiraling beyond his ability to manage. The rent notice commanded attention through sheer force of red ink. $1,695 due in 8 days, shouted from the page like a countdown timer to disaster. His landlord had been understanding through month 5. Month 8 had arrived with this notice and verbal warning that month 9 would involve legal proceedings. Dante pulled out his phone thumb, moving through the ritual of checking his bank account, even though he knew exactly what he'd find. The number glowed back at him, $823.47. Simple arithmetic told the story. Rent consumed every dollar and left him $871.53 short before considering anything else. Medical bills from Zara's recent flu sat underneath the rent notice, a modest $340 that might as well have been $340,000. Electricity, water, gas, phone, car insurance. The stack represented collective debt that made his chest physically tight. The coffee maker was one of the few items Dante hadn't pawned yet, mainly because the shop had offered $8 for a machine Simone had paid $70 for. Some possessions you kept on principle, even when principle was a luxury you couldn't afford. He measured grounds from a container running dangerously low and listened to the machine gurgle to life. While it brewed, Dante moved to the shelf that served as memorial to the life he'd lost 4 years ago. Simone's photograph smiled at him from a simple black frame. Wedding day. Both of them impossibly young and convinced love could build foundations strong enough to weather anything. She wore white. He wore the same suit he'd be putting on in a few hours back when it had been new and represented investment in a future that made sense. Simone Marie Blackwood, 1985 to 2020. The engraved date marked her beginning and ending the drunk driver who'd turned a Tuesday grocery run into the worst phone call of Dante's existence, compressed into a dash between years. He didn't let himself linger. That path led to places he couldn't afford to visit. Not this morning, when he needed to be sharp and focused and ready to convince strangers he deserved a chance to prove his worth. Dante poured coffee into a chipped mug advertising a 2018 tech conference when InnoData had been thriving and sent its senior engineers to networking events. The liquid was black and bitter, exactly how he needed it. He was reviewing bills for the 1,000th time when soft footsteps announced Zara's arrival. She appeared in the doorway wrapped in her purple blanket, hair standing in every direction, rubbing sleep from her eyes with one small fist. Dante's heart performed its usual complicated gymnastics. Love mixed with fear, mixed with determination, mixed with the crushing weight of being all she had left. "Daddy," her voice came out rough with sleep. He pushed bills aside, making space she'd claim whether he offered it or not. "Hey, baby girl, you should be sleeping." Zara shuffled over, climbing into the chair opposite him with practiced ease. The blanket pooled around her purple fleece, soft against harsh kitchen fluorescence. She'd turned 7 2 months ago, but sometimes in moments like this, looked younger, small and vulnerable in ways that made Dante want to fight the entire world barehanded. "I heard you get up." She reached toward his coffee mug. He moved it beyond her range before she could burn herself. "That's not for 7-year-olds. I wasn't gonna drink it." She settled for resting her chin on the table, eyes tracking to the bills he hadn't hidden fast enough. Her finger traced the rent notice edge. "Is that the house paper?" Dante had explained rent months ago, searching for words that made sense without terrifying her. Zara had processed it with the logical clarity children brought to math problems, trusting numbers more than emotions. "Yeah, that's the house paper. 8 days. She read slowly, sounding out each word. "That's not very many." "No, it's not." She chewed her bottom lip, a habit inherited from Simone, along with the gap between her front teeth. "Are you getting the job today?" The question landed like a physical blow. Dante looked at his daughter's face, at the absolute faith written there, and felt something crack in his chest. "I'm going to try my very best." The answer was true and completely inadequate. Zara nodded anyway, apparently satisfied, and slid off the chair. She padded to her bedroom blanket, trailing behind her like a cape. She returned carrying construction paper folded carefully in half. The outside had been decorated with stickers, stars, rockets, one inexplicable unicorn, all arranged with serious artistic intent. I made this for you, for good luck. Dante took the card with hands that weren't quite steady. He unfolded it slowly, aware that whatever was inside represented hours of concentration and love he didn't deserve but would accept because his daughter was offering it. The drawing showed two figures in front of a tall building that stretched nearly to the page's top. The taller figure wore what Zara had interpreted as a business suit rendered in blue with careful attention to tie and jacket buttons. The smaller figure held the tall one's hand, purple dress and hair defying gravity. Above them, stars filled the sky despite the building, suggesting daytime. Words marched across the top in uneven letters, some backwards, all capitalized, "My daddy is the best." Dante stared at the card until his vision blurred. He blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall because crying at 4:30 in the morning might mean never stopping. The building is where you're going to work. Zara leaned against his shoulder, pointing at her artwork. I made it really tall because you're going to have a really important job. And those are stars because Mommy's watching and she's proud of you too. The crack in Dante's chest widened into something that threatened to swallow him whole. He pulled Zara into a hug that was probably too tight, pressing his face against her hair that smelled like strawberry shampoo Mrs. Hartwell had bought on sale. Thank you, baby girl. This is the best good luck card anyone has ever made. Zara squeezed back arms surprisingly strong. You're going to get this job, Daddy. I know you are. Her certainty should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like another weight added to a load already crushing him. 14 interviews, 14 rejections, and here was his 7-year-old daughter convinced number 15 would be different. I hope you're right. They stayed like that until a key turned in the apartment door. Mrs. Hartwell let herself in with the practiced quiet of someone who'd spent 30 years managing elementary school classrooms. She carried a covered dish that smelled like homemade chicken soup, the kind that took hours and cost more than she'd ever admit. Vivian Hartwell was 64, retired on a teacher's pension that wasn't generous but was more stable than Dante's current circumstances. She'd appointed herself as Zara's honorary grandmother 6 months ago, when Dante first explained the situation, and had been providing childcare without accepting payment, despite his repeated attempts. Good morning. She took in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Bills on the table card in Dante's hands, evidence of sleepless night written across his face. How's our patient? Zara extracted herself from Dante's hug, suddenly animated. I'm all better. My fever went away and I didn't cough hardly at all. Mrs. Hartwell set the soup down and crouched to Zara's level, pressing the back of her hand against the girl's forehead in that universal grandmother gesture. You do feel cooler, but I think you should stay home from school anyway, just to be safe. But I'm going to miss the science lesson. I'll make sure you don't fall behind. Mrs. Hartwell straightened with joints that popped audibly. To Dante, you look like you slept in a blender. Dante managed something close to a smile. Pretty accurate assessment. Mrs. Hartwell moved to the coffee maker, pouring herself a cup without asking permission. She'd earned that right months ago. Big day today. Interview number 14, which means interview number 14 is when everything changes. She added 3 sugars, making a face at the bitterness even sweetened. I can feel it. Dante appreciated the sentiment even if he couldn't share the optimism. Mrs. Hartwell had said some version of this before every interview, faith unshakable even as rejection letters accumulated. She'd lived through the civil rights movement, raised 4 children alone after her husband died young, and somehow maintained belief that good things happened to people who deserved them. He pulled out 2 20s from his wallet, precious cash he'd withdrawn for emergencies. For watching Zara, Mrs. Hartwell pushed the money back like it burned her fingers. Absolutely not. Mrs. Hartwell. Vivian, how many times? Vivian, Dante corrected. You're watching my daughter all day. You brought soup. You deserve to be paid. She crossed her arms, transforming into the elementary teacher who'd commanded respect for 3 decades. I'm retired, Dante. I have more time than I know what to do with and more money than I need. What I don't have is grandchildren nearby because my children scattered across the country like migrating birds. Zara is the closest thing I've got, and you're doing me a favor. That's not. Save it for rent. Save it for Zara's medicine. Save it for whatever emergency comes next week. Her voice was gentle but iron firm. But don't insult me by making love transactional. Dante's throat worked around words that wouldn't come. When I get this job. When you get this job, you take me to that fancy seafood place downtown, the one that makes normal people faint at the prices. Deal. The shower water never got hot enough in this building, but Dante stood under lukewarm spray trying to wash away exhaustion and fear. He studied his reflection in the bathroom mirror afterward, seeing a 35-year-old face that looked older than the calendar suggested. Gray, threading his temples, dark circles under his eyes, the appearance of someone who'd been fighting and losing for too long. The suit hung on the bathroom door, same navy blue he'd worn to every interview for 8 months. Purchased for his wedding 11 years ago, maintained carefully, but showing wear at the elbows. It still fit, though the style had aged in ways he couldn't afford to update. Dante dressed with ritual precision. White shirt recently ironed. Conservative tie dark blue with subtle pattern. Jacket on last, and he studied the effect. Professional, competent, completely unremarkable. He slipped Zara's card into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. Small talisman against a world that kept finding reasons to say no. The drive to Cortex Systems took 35 minutes through morning traffic, his 1998 Honda Accord wheezing to life on the third attempt. The check engine light illuminated like a judgmental eye. 214,000 miles of refusing to die through sheer stubbornness and prayer to deities Dante didn't believe in. He merged onto I-5 as Seattle woke around him, fog rolling in from the sound to wrap around skyscrapers and blur the Space Needle into ghostly outline. Dante had lived here his whole life, watched the city transform from affordable working-class neighborhoods into tech paradise where coffee cost $7 and rent increases came with the inevitability of rain. The radio played NPR discussing economic recovery that apparently hadn't reached people like him. Dante turned it off, needing silence to prepare for questions he could anticipate and curveballs he couldn't. The passenger seat held his notebook spiral binding fraying. He'd reviewed it at a stoplight yesterday, studying patterns identified across 13 interviews. Average duration, 14.3 minutes. Industry standard for senior positions, 45 to 60 minutes. The gap told its own story about systematic rejection disguised as professional courtesy. Cortex Building appeared as he exited the highway, 12 stories of glass and steel designed to intimidate anyone approaching without venture capital or proper credentials. Dante parked in the visitor lot, checked his tie in the rearview mirror, and pulled out Zara's card one more time. "My daddy is the best." The words stared back at him with absolute certainty that he wished he could borrow. He slipped the card into his pocket and stepped out of the car. The walk from parking lot to building entrance took 90 seconds that felt like crossing a desert. His reflection fractured and multiplied in the glass doors until he looked like an army of one uncertain man. Cortex Lobby announced its success through design choices meant to impress and intimidate simultaneously. Polished marble floors reflected lighting that probably cost more per fixture than Dante's monthly rent. Modern art occupied corners, abstract sculptures with names like Synergy or Disruption. Young employees moved with the confident stride of people whose student loans had been forgiven and stock options had vested early. Dante counted faces automatically. 90% white, maybe 7% Asian. The handful of black faces clustered in security and facilities rather than engineering. Pattern recognition applied to demographics, observation automatic after 8 months of rejection. The receptionist looked up as he approached, professional smile engaging like a switch. 20-something blonde studied casualness requiring significant effort. "Good morning, welcome to Cortec. How can I help you?" Her voice carried practiced friendliness of trained gatekeepers. Dante returned the smile, keeping his own expression neutral and unthreatening in ways he'd learned were necessary. "Dante Blackwood, and I have an interview scheduled for 9 a.m. She typed his name, manicured nails clicking. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Senior software engineer position. Conference room B, third floor. She handed him a visitor badge with his name in temporary ink. Someone will be down shortly. Dante clipped the badge to his jacket and moved to the indicated seating area. The leather chairs were expensive and uncomfortable in that specific way, signaling cost over ergonomics. He sat back straight, hands folded over the notebook in his lap. Lobby traffic flowed around him. Engineers discussed containerization and Kubernetes with easy confidence of people who belonged. Two women in sharp suits talked about Q3 projections, heels clicking across marble. Everyone moved with purpose and certainty about being exactly where they should be. Dante had felt that certainty once at InnoData, when he'd been part of a team solving problems that mattered. 8 years building a career, cultivating expertise, earning reputation that should have made these interviews formalities. Then the acquisition, the relocation requirement, the choice between following a job to Boston or staying where Zara had school and friends and the only home she remembered. The choice had been easy. The consequences had been brutal. A security guard passed by older black man with gray threading his hair. Name tag read Felix Okoro, 22 years service. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Something passed between them. Recognition, solidarity, the subtle acknowledgement of two men navigating the same space from the same disadvantaged position. Felix gave a small nod. Dante returned it. Mr. Blackwood. The voice pulled his attention to a woman descending the staircase. 40-something white sharp gray suit that probably cost more than Dante's entire wardrobe. She moved with brisk efficiency, suggesting time was measured in billable increments. Dante stood extending his hand. Yes, thank you for seeing me. Her handshake was firm and brief, professional, without warmth. Cassandra Sterling, HR Director. We're ready for you upstairs. He followed her to the elevator, watching floor numbers climb, while Cassandra made small talk about Seattle weather and traffic patterns. Conversational filler designed to assess whether he could engage in basic social interaction. Dante responded appropriately, mentally cataloging every detail for later documentation. Conference room B was glass-walled, offering no privacy but the illusion of transparency. Two people waited inside, both standing, as Cassandra led Dante through the door. This is Bradford Whitmore, our VP of Technology. She gestured to a man in his late 20s who radiated the particular confidence of someone never told no. And Dr. Evelyn Cross, our Chief Technology Officer. Bradford's handshake conveyed superiority and boredom in a single gesture. Dr. Cross compensated with actual warmth, her grip firm and smile reaching her eyes. 60-something silver hair cut short, the bearing of someone who'd earned position through competence. They took seats around the conference table. 3 interviewers on one side, Dante alone on the other. Digital recording device blinking in the corner. Windows exposing him to anyone walking past. Bradford opened a folder scanning contents with an expression suggesting grocery list review. 8 years at InnoData Systems senior software engineer specializing in database architecture. Impressive resume. The tone suggested the opposite. Dante had learned not to react to subtext. Thank you. I specialized in recovery protocols and data integrity systems. Your most significant project? Dr. Cross asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. This was territory Dante knew, cold technical achievements that should speak for themselves. Year 6, we experienced major database corruption threatening 3 years of customer records. The team worked 48 hours without progress. I developed a recovery protocol that identified source corruption in the indexing system, then rebuilt backup architecture to prevent future incidents. Total resolution 6 hours from diagnosis to full restoration. Bradford's eyebrow arched. 6 hours, our consultants estimated 2 weeks for similar issues. Most teams assume corruption patterns are random. They approach recovery as comprehensive rebuild. But if you identify the specific failure point, you can isolate and repair without touching functional architecture. Pattern recognition applied to system behavior. Dr. Cross made notes, nodding approval. Sophisticated thinking. What brought you to Cortec after 8 years at InnoData? And there it was, the question opening the door to everything else. Dante had practiced this answer, refined it to contain maximum information with minimum vulnerability. InnoData was acquired last year. The new parent company consolidated operations in Boston. I evaluated the opportunity and decided my roots in Seattle took priority. Cassandra's pen stopped moving. The shift was subtle but unmistakable to someone who'd learned to watch for it. Roots in Seattle. Can you elaborate? Dante's chest tightened. This was the branch point where honesty and strategy collided. He could deflect, keep it vague, avoid mentioning Zara entirely. Or he could be direct, own the truth, and watch the interview end in real time. The card in his pocket felt heavier than construction paper should weigh. He met Cassandra's eyes and chose truth. I'm a single father. My daughter is 7. Uprooting her from her school, her friends, the only home she remembers, it wasn't a choice I could make lightly. Stability mattered more than career advancement. The temperature dropped 5 degrees. Bradford and Cassandra exchanged a glance, silent communication between people who'd worked together long enough for shorthand. Dr. Cross's expression remained neutral, but she'd stopped taking notes. Dante checked his watch peripherally, careful not to make the motion obvious. 6 minutes 47 seconds into the interview. Right on schedule. Cassandra recovered, first professional mask sliding back. Single father, that's quite a responsibility. The words landed with careful neutrality, but Dante heard what wasn't being said. Complicated. Risky. Divided attention. It makes me more reliable, not less. I've never missed a deadline or failed to deliver on commitments. Of course, Bradford's dismissiveness could have filled volumes. But this position requires significant flexibility. Late nights, weekend deployments, emergency responses at 2 a.m. How do you manage that with a child at home? Dante had heard versions of this across 13 interviews. The answer was always the same, and it never mattered. I have reliable childcare support. My neighbor manages Zara's schedule around work demands. I've maintained perfect attendance even while balancing both responsibilities. Dr. Cross leaned back, studying him with eyes that had evaluated candidates for 30 years. Mr. Blackwood, I don't doubt your technical capabilities. Your resume speaks to exceptional skill, but we need honesty about the demands this role places on senior engineers. I appreciate honesty, though honest was the last word he'd use for what was happening. I'd like to offer the same in return. This is my 14th interview in 8 months, and I've noticed a pattern. Cassandra's spine went rigid. Mr. Blackwood, he pulled out his notebook, flipping to the bookmarked page. Interview duration across 13 previous companies averaged 14.3 minutes. Industry standard for senior positions 45 to 60 minutes. The cooling point, that precise moment when professional interest shifts to professional distance, occurs an average of 6.8 minutes after I mention having a daughter. The silence could have stopped hearts. Bradford found his voice first. That's quite an accusation. It's documentation. Dante kept his tone level even as his pulse hammered. I'm not accusing anyone of anything illegal. I'm pointing out a pattern that becomes impossible to ignore after the 13th iteration. He turned the notebook so they could see his handwriting. Neat columns looking like evidence, because that's exactly what it was. Interview number, company name, duration, cooling point timestamp, rejection, reason given. Cassandra stood abruptly, chair scraping floor. This interview is over. Of course it is. Because now I've made everyone uncomfortable by naming what we all know is happening. Dr. Cross raised a hand, peaceful gesture, stopping Bradford from whatever he'd been about to say. Mr. Blackwood, I understand your frustration. Do you? Dante stood as well, gathering his notebook with hands that wanted to shake. Because from where I'm standing, I just watched the same script play out for the 14th time. Technical questions going well, then I mention Zara. Then suddenly we discover concerns about flexibility and divided attention and cultural fit. He paused at the door, looking back at 3 faces that had already written him off. If I were white, with a stay-at-home wife, this conversation would be about start dates and salary negotiation. We all know it. The only difference is I'm willing to say it out loud. Bradford's face flushed. You're being completely unprofessional. I'm being honest, which apparently isn't professional in rooms like this. Cassandra pulled out her own notebook, making a show of writing. Her voice could have cut glass. We'll note your concerns in your file. Mark me as not suitable for company culture. Dante recognized the phrase from rejection letter number 9. That's the usual code, isn't it? He walked out before anyone could respond past glass walls that had turned the whole interview into spectator sport. Several employees had gathered to watch faces pressed close enough to catch fragments of confrontation. Felix stood near the elevator, expression carefully neutral but eyes tracking Dante's exit with what might have been respect. The elevator doors closed on Cassandra's face, fury and embarrassment, fighting for dominance. Dante leaned against the back wall, trying to remember how to breathe normally. 14 interviews. 14 rejections. And this time he'd burned the bridge so thoroughly that even politeness wouldn't rise from the ashes. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Hartwell. Zara wanted me to tell you she knows you got the job because you're the smartest daddy in the whole world. Dante stared at the message until the elevator reached the ground floor. His daughter's faith felt like a weight he couldn't carry and couldn't put down. The lobby had shifted from morning quiet to mid-morning chaos, people rushing between meetings with anthill urgency. Dante moved through them like a ghost, invisible in exactly the way he'd learned to be. His car sat in the visitor lot where he'd left it, unremarkable and patient. Dante slid behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. He pulled out Zara's card instead, studying the drawing that had seemed so full of hope this morning. My daddy is the best. The words blurred as his eyes filled with water he'd been holding back for 8 months. 14 failures. 8 months watching his daughter believe in a father who couldn't deliver. 8 days until eviction. $823.47 against a world that cost so much more. Dante pressed the card against his chest and finally let himself break. The crying was silent and brief tears from a well-capped too long. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, took 3 deep breaths and pulled out his phone to check the bank account one more time. Still, $823.47. The number hadn't magically improved. He was reaching for the ignition when movement in the building caught his eye. Through Cortex floor-to-ceiling windows he could see people running. Not the casual rush of late employees, but actual panic mode sprinting. Someone gestured frantically at a screen. Another person held a phone to their ear, face pale even at this distance. More people appeared converging on what looked like the main server area. A man in an expensive suit burst from the elevator, the CEO if Dante had to guess from how people made space. The man's posture screamed crisis, hands moving in sharp gestures, punctuating whatever he was shouting. Then the first van arrived, pulling up with emergency speed. Logo on the side read, Data Fix Emergency Response, in letters designed to inspire confidence during disasters. 2 technicians jumped out carrying equipment cases. Dante sat up straighter, professional instincts overriding personal devastation. A second van appeared, different company logo. Then a third. Within 10 minutes, 5 different consultant teams had descended on Cortec like medical specialists responding to Code Blue. And through the windows, Dante could see screen after screen displaying the same thing, red error messages that made technical teams break out in cold sweats. He recognized those patterns. He'd seen them before 3 years ago at InnoData, when database corruption had brought the entire company to a standstill. The memory was visceral, 2 days of consultants failing to solve what should have been straightforward until Dante had identified the root cause in validation protocols. The same validation protocols he could see Cortex consultants examining, now through the glass approaching the problem from the same wrong direction that always led to failure. Dante's fingers found his notebook, flipping to a page from 3 years ago where he'd documented the InnoData solution. The approach, the specific files needing attention, the sequence of operations that would isolate and repair without destroying. He watched another consultant team rush inside. Counted 6 different company logos now probably running up bills at thousands of dollars per hour. All of them about to waste time and money looking for complex solutions to a problem that only seemed complicated. These people had rejected him 40 minutes ago, had questioned his competence based on his skin color and his daughter, had decided he wasn't suitable for their company culture, and now their company was burning while they threw money at consultants who didn't understand the fire. Dante should start the car, drive home, tell Zara that Daddy tried his best, figure out which bills to pay and which to let slide. Start preparing for the conversation about why they might need to move somewhere cheaper. Instead, he found himself looking at the card in his lap. My daddy is the best. Zara believed it with absolute certainty. Mrs. Hartwell believed it with earned wisdom. Even Simone had believed it back when she was alive to offer opinions. The only person who didn't believe it was Dante himself. He thought about what he'd told Zara this morning about doing your best even when scared. Thought about the values he'd been trying to teach through this nightmare of unemployment and rejection. Thought about whether he wanted her to learn that you fought for yourself or gave up when the world said no. Through the window, he saw the CEO throw what looked like a tablet. The device hit a marble pillar and shattered pieces scattering. The man's face was red enough to be visible from the parking lot, stress and fury painting him in shades Dante recognized from his own mirror. Cortec was dying. The consultants were failing. And Dante Blackwood, unsuitable for company culture and unreliable due to divided attention, was the only person in that parking lot who knew how to save them. The notebook in his hand felt heavier than paper should feel. Documentation of 14 failures. Proof of a pattern that would continue until someone decided to break it. Dante looked at his daughter's drawing one more time. At the tall building she'd drawn because she believed her daddy deserved important work in important places. At the stars she'd added because she thought Simone was watching and proud. He folded the card carefully and tucked it back into his jacket pocket right over his heart. Then he opened the car door and stood up, legs steadier than they'd been 20 minutes ago. Felix noticed him first recognition flickering across the security guard's face as Dante approached the entrance. Their eyes met again, and this time the understanding was explicit. Felix gave a subtle nod and stepped aside, making no move to stop what was about to happen. Dante pulled open the door and walked back into Cortex Systems toward the chaos and the failing consultants, and the CEO whose company was hemorrhaging money by the minute. Walked toward the chance to prove that unsuitable and unreliable could still be exactly what they needed. Walked toward the moment when invisible became undeniable. The lobby had transformed into a war room while Dante sat in his car, contemplating failure. Cable runs snaked across marble floors like technological intestines exposed during emergency surgery. Workstations crowded every available surface monitors displaying cascading error messages in shades of red that meant nothing good. The air tasted like ozone and panic, that particular blend of burnt electronics and human sweat that accompanied disasters too large to contain. Dante counted heads as he wove through the chaos. 97 people by his estimation, maybe more, tucked into corners he couldn't see from this angle. At least 12 different company logos on jackets and equipment cases, consultant firms charging emergency rates while accomplishing nothing visible. The noise was overwhelming. Phones ringing unanswered. Keyboards clacking in desperate rhythms. Voices raised in technical arguments that went nowhere productive. He recognized the pattern instantly. Too many experts, not enough expertise. Each consultant team working their own theory, stepping on each other's attempts, creating interference instead of solutions. Classic disaster response failure, throwing resources at a problem without coordinating the assault. A young security guard materialized at Dante's elbow hand, already moving toward his radio. White, probably early 30s, the kind of by-the-book enforcement that came from insufficient experience and excessive enthusiasm. Sir, buildings in lockdown, only authorized personnel and approved consultants past this point. The words came out clipped and certain, someone who'd been told exactly what to say and planned to say it regardless of circumstances. His name tag identified him as Lawrence Chen, 3 years of service, according to the number beneath his name. Dante started to respond, but Felix appeared before he could formulate an argument. The older guard moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd earned every year of his 22-year tenure. "Lawrence, stand down." Lawrence's hand hovered near his radio confusion, replacing certainty. "But protocol says—" "I'm senior. I said stand down." Felix's voice carried the weight of 2 decades navigating corporate politics and security protocols. He turned to Dante, something like respect flickering behind his professional mask. "You came back." Not a question. An observation that acknowledged the insanity of walking toward a crisis that had nothing to do with him, offered by people who'd already decided he had nothing to offer them. Dante's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I think I can help." "Then you better move fast." Felix gestured toward the chaos surrounding the main server area. "They're panicking, and panic makes people stupid." Lawrence retreated, muttering about procedures and liability words that dissolved into the general noise without impact. Dante pressed forward into the crisis zone, dodging consultants who moved with urgent inefficiency. He caught fragments of conversation as he navigated the crowd. Primary database completely corrupted, 7 years of customer data inaccessible. Tried 3 different backup restoration protocols. Corruption spreads to every copy we touch. Stock price down 12% in the last 90 minutes. Harrison's going to lose the board if this isn't fixed by 2 p.m. us. Numbers and consequences painted the scope of disaster. Whatever had broken wasn't just technical. It was existential. The kind of failure that destroyed companies and ended careers. Dante's eyes tracked to the visible screens, reading error codes that told a story anyone with database expertise could interpret. Validation protocol failure. Cascading corruption through backup systems. Automated recovery processes caught in infinite loops each attempt, making things worse instead of better. He'd seen this exact pattern before. A voice cut through the noise, sharp with fury, barely contained. "What do you mean you need another 4 hours? I was told 90 minutes 2 hours ago." The CEO stood in the center of the chaos like a general watching his army disintegrate. Harrison Whitmore, mid-50s, silver hair that probably looked distinguished in boardroom photographs, but now stood up in directions suggesting he'd been running his hands through it. His suit was expensive, and rumpled tie, loosened jacket, abandoned somewhere in the building. Stress had painted red splotches across his neck and cheeks. The lead consultant, expensive suit, graying temples, the confident bearing of someone who charged premium rates, tried to explain in technical terms that translated to, "We have no idea what we're doing." The corruption is more extensive than initial diagnostics suggested. We're seeing failures across multiple system layers, which indicates. Harrison's hand moved so fast, Dante almost missed it. The tablet flew across the lobby, connecting with a marble pillar in an explosion of glass and electronics that brought momentary silence to the surrounding chaos. Pieces skittered across the floor, the CEO's frustration made physical and undeniable. "I don't need explanations. I need my database operational." Harrison's voice carried the particular quality of a man watching his empire burn. "Every hour this system is down costs us $4.2 million in suspended transactions. We have investors arriving at 2 o'clock for a presentation that depends entirely on data we can't access. Someone tell me how we fix this or start explaining how we survive the alternative." The consultant opened his mouth, closed. It opened it again. No words emerged that would make the situation better. Dante recognized his moment and took it before courage could abandon him. His voice cut through the renewed chaos, calm and certain in a room full of panic. "The corruption isn't in your primary database. It's in your backup validation protocols." Every head within hearing distance turned. Harrison's eyes found Dante with the intensity of a drowning man spotting a life raft. "Who are you?" Before Dante could answer, Cassandra Sterling appeared from somewhere in the crowd. Her face cycled through emotions too quickly to catalog surprise recognition, fury, embarrassment, all fighting for dominance. She positioned herself between Dante and the CEO, body language, screaming territorial protection. Security, this man is not authorized to be here. He needs to be removed immediately. Harrison's attention shifted between Dante and Cassandra, reading dynamics. Neither of them had time to explain. Removed why? Cassandra's professional mask cracked slightly. We interviewed him this morning. The position was not a good fit for company culture. Company culture. Harrison repeated the words like they tasted bad. Our databases are on fire, and you're worried about culture. Bradford Whitmore materialized beside his father. Privilege and entitlement radiating from every pore. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Same sharp features, same natural authority, though Bradford wore his like he'd been born to it, rather than earned through decades of building something from nothing. Father, this is highly irregular. We have 50 consultants working the problem, who have failed for 2 hours and counting. Harrison's attention returned to Dante assessment happening in real time. You said validation protocols. Explain. Dante pulled his notebook from his pocket, flipping to documentation from 3 years ago. His hands were steady despite every instinct screaming that this was insane, that walking into another rejection was masochism dressed as bravery. I've seen this exact failure pattern. Inno data systems 3 years ago. Database corruption that looked catastrophic but originated from a single point of failure in the backup validation architecture. He held out the notebook pages covered in technical diagrams and solution sequences. Harrison took it, scanning contents with the speed of someone who'd spent 30 years evaluating technical proposals. The lead consultant pushed forward, professional pride wounded and bleeding. Sir, with all respect, we have certified experts conducting comprehensive diagnostics. How long have your certified experts been here? Dante asked the question, direct and unapologetic. 2 hours and 7 minutes. And how long have I been watching through those windows, recognizing the exact error patterns I solved in 6 hours when your consultants estimated 2 weeks? Dante pointed toward the visible screens. Your teams are looking for complex solutions because they assume corruption this extensive must have complicated causes. But sometimes the answer is elegant simplicity. Harrison's eyes narrowed, calculation happening behind them. 6 hours to solve what took my team 2 weeks to quote. 4 hours once I identified the validation protocol corruption. 2 hours of false starts because I was approaching it like everyone else, looking for the big, obvious failure instead of the small, critical one. Dr. Evelyn Cross appeared at Harrison's shoulder, her presence somehow commanding, despite her smaller stature. She'd been somewhere deeper in the chaos, sleeves rolled up and fingers stained with what looked like toner from a printer autopsy. Her eyes tracked to Dante with recognition that went beyond this morning's disaster of an interview. Mr. Blackwood. Not a question, but acknowledgement weighted with significance. You're the candidate I reviewed yesterday. The InnoData database recovery isn't exaggeration. I verified it with their former CTO. Your approach was unorthodox but brilliant. Harrison's attention sharpened. You verified his work. I verify all senior technical candidates' major achievements. His solution to InnoData's crisis would have taken our consultants weeks to even conceptualize. Dr. Cross turned to Dante, something like apology in her expression. I recommended you strongly. I was overruled on cultural fit concerns. The words hung in the air, indictment and vindication wrapped together. Cassandra's face went pale. Bradford's flushed red. Harrison looked between them with dawning comprehension and rising fury. Cultural fit. The CEO's voice could have etched glass. You rejected the person who could save us because of cultural fit. No one answered. The silence was its own confession. Harrison's decision came with the speed of someone who'd built an empire by trusting his instincts. Mr. Blackwood, what do you need? Dante had prepared for rejection, not acceptance. The question caught him off balance for half a second before training reasserted itself. 5 minutes at a diagnostic terminal. Full access to your database management systems. Nobody interrupts me while I work. The lead consultant made one last attempt to salvage professional dignity. Sir, we can't allow unauthorized access to critical infrastructure. The liability alone, Harrison's patience evaporated. The liability of losing $4.2 million per hour outweighs whatever concerns your manufacturing. Dr. Cross, give him whatever access he needs. Everyone else clear space and stay out of his way. Dr. Cross was already moving, gesturing for Dante to follow. They wove through the consultant teams toward a workstation that looked like mission control for a spacecraft launch. Multiple monitors, high-end processing equipment cables connecting to the server infrastructure in ways that suggested this was where serious diagnostic work happened. A young engineer sat at the terminal, face pale with stress and exhaustion. He looked up as Dr. Cross approached, relief flooding his features. Dr. Cross, I've been trying to isolate the corruption source, but every diagnostic I run returns contradictory data. Jason, this is Dante Blackwood. Give him your seat and assist however he needs. Dr. Cross's tone allowed no argument. Jason Miller, name tag confirmed it, vacated the chair with visible reluctance. His eyes tracked to Dante with the suspicion of someone protective of workspace being invaded by an outsider. Dante sat down, hands hovering over the keyboard for a moment, while he oriented himself to the system architecture displayed across the monitors. The setup was familiar enough, despite being Cortex-specific implementation. All enterprise database systems followed certain patterns variations on themes he'd been working with for 8 years. The consultants had gathered in a semicircle behind him, close enough to observe, but keeping the distance Harrison had demanded. Dante could feel their skepticism, like radiation professionals watching an amateur attempt what they'd failed to accomplish. He blocked them out. Blocked out everything except the screens and the problem they represented. The first step was diagnostic confirmation, verifying what he suspected rather than assuming his hypothesis matched reality. Dante navigated to the backup validation logs, pulling files from the past 24 hours. The data streamed across his center monitor, timestamps and status codes, painting a picture of systematic failure. There. His finger touched the screen at a specific entry. 3:47 a.m., scheduled validation integrity check. Jason leaned in, squinting at the timestamp. That's routine. System runs validation every night to verify backup integrity. Look at the completion time. The younger engineer's eyes widened. 41 seconds. That can't be right. Normal validation takes 11 minutes minimum. Exactly. Dante's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up comparative logs from previous nights. Every other validation over the past 6 months, 10 to 12 minutes. But last night, and only last night, 41 seconds to supposedly complete a process that requires significantly more time. Dr. Cross moved closer, understanding dawning across her features. The validation didn't actually run. Worse. It tried to run hit corruption or interference, and the system logged success to avoid triggering an error cascade. Dante pulled up another screen showing the validation file architecture. Now watch what happens when we try to restore from backup using corrupted validation protocols. He initiated a test restoration on a sandboxed portion of the database, every consultant in the room watching the process unfold. The restoration began normally, backup data flowing into the target system. Then the validation check engaged corrupted protocols examining the incoming data. Status verified clean. The restoration completed. Dante ran a manual diagnostic on the restored data. Result 47%, corruption detected. Jason's breath caught. The validation protocols are telling the system that corrupted data is clean. Every restoration attempt spreads the infection deeper into your backup architecture. Dante closed the test environment before it could cause additional damage. You're not dealing with primary database corruption. You're dealing with compromised validation that makes recovery impossible through normal channels. The lead consultant pushed forward professional pride, demanding he find fault with this assessment. Our diagnostics specifically checked validation protocols. They reported clean. Dante didn't look away from the screens. What did you use to verify the protocols? Standard validation verification tools. The consultant stopped mid-sentence as understanding arrived. Which rely on the validation protocols themselves. You asked a broken thermometer if it was broken. Dante's voice held no triumph, just the tired certainty of someone who'd seen this exact mistake before. The corruption is invisible to any diagnostic that depends on the corrupted system to verify itself. Harrison had moved close enough to see the monitors following the technical discussion with the comprehension of someone who'd built a tech company from the ground up. Can you fix it? Yes, but I need to take your database completely offline. No automated processes, no monitoring, no recovery attempts while I work. For how long? Dante ran calculations in his head, factoring in system size and complexity beyond what he'd dealt with at InnoData. 3 to 4 minutes of total shutdown, maybe 5 if the corruption is more extensive than these logs suggest. The lead consultant's professional objection was reflexive. That's enormous risk. If something goes wrong during total shutdown, we're already dead in the water. Harrison's decision was immediate and final. Mr. Black would do whatever you need to do. Dr. Cross will authorize it. Dr. Cross moved to the terminal beside Dante's, fingers flying across her keyboard. You'll need my authorization codes for root access. Ready? Dante pulled up the command interface, fingers positioned over keys that would shut down millions of dollars of infrastructure. This was the moment where confidence became commitment, where theory tested itself against reality. He thought about Zara's card in his pocket. My daddy is the best. Thought about 8 months of failure and rejection. Thought about Mrs. Hartwell's faith and Simone's memory and the rent notice that said 8 days like a countdown to disaster. Thought about whether he wanted to be the man who tried or the man who walked away. His hands began to type. The process unfolded in stages, each one increasing the risk while decreasing the options for retreat. First shutdown of all automated recovery processes. Warning dialogues exploded across his screens, red text screaming about critical system termination. Dante dismissed each one, maintaining focus on the sequence that mattered. A consultant behind him gasped, "He's killing life support systems." "He knows what he's doing." Dr. Cross's voice carried absolute certainty, though Dante suspected she was hoping as much as knowing. Second stage engaged. Dante navigated deep into the file architecture, following paths that required understanding the system's skeleton rather than just its visible anatomy. The corrupted validation directory appeared exactly where his experience suggested it would be, buried in infrastructure most engineers never accessed. 3 files glowed on his screen, each one marked with timestamps from 3:47 a.m. The corruption signatures were subtle, wouldn't be visible to casual inspection. But Dante had learned to see what others missed, pattern recognition applied to digital architecture. Deleting critical system files in 5 seconds. He announced, giving anyone who wanted to stop him a chance to speak up. No one did. His finger hit enter. The files vanished. Every screen in his workspace went black. The silence that followed was absolute. 97 people holding their breath simultaneously. Dante counted heartbeats, maintaining external calm, while internal panic screamed that he'd just destroyed a multi-million-dollar infrastructure beyond any hope of recovery. 5 heartbeats, 10, 15. The screens flickered. Text began scrolling, white letters on black background reporting system processes in language only engineers understood. Regenerating validation. Protocols from Archive v3.8. Progress bar appeared. 45%, 60%, 80%. Each percentage point represented data being rebuilt from uncorrupted backups stored deeper in the architecture. Clean copies the corrupted validation had never touched. 95%, 99%, 100%. Protocols verified clean. The text changed, new process initiating without Dante's input. The system recognized clean validation and immediately began what it had been trying to do for the past 2 hours. Initiating database restoration from secondary backup. Data started flowing back. Customer records appearing in neat rows. Transaction histories rebuilding themselves. Account information populating databases that had been empty wastelands minutes before. Jason made a sound that wasn't quite a word, halfway between shock and reverence. It's working. Holy shit, it's actually working. Dr. Cross ran a parallel diagnostic on her terminal verification happening in real time. Her voice emerged tight with relief and lingering disbelief. Primary database coming online, corruption levels dropping, 70% clean, 80, 90. The status board that dominated the far wall began shifting from red to amber to green, each indicator representing a subsystem returning to operational status. The transformation rippled across the display like dominoes falling in reverse chaos, resolving into order. 95%, 98, 99, 100%. Primary database online. Zero corruption detected. All systems operational. The lobby erupted. Cheers and applause competed with relief and disbelief. Consultants who'd spent 2 hours failing, now celebrating someone else's success. Because at least the crisis was over. Jason grabbed Dante's hand, shaking it with enthusiasm that threatened to dislocate something. 45 minutes. You fixed it in 45 minutes. Dante's hands were shaking, now that adrenaline had nowhere productive to go. He clasped them together under the desk where no one could see the tremor. Diagnosis took time. The fix itself was straightforward once I identified the source. Dr. Cross's expression held something beyond professional respect, the kind of acknowledgement that transcended workplace hierarchies. Brilliant doesn't adequately describe what you just did, but Dante barely heard the praise. His eyes had caught something wrong in the validation file logs, a pattern that shouldn't exist in random corruption. He pulled up the detailed metadata, examining timestamps with the same pattern recognition that had identified the original problem. The modification dates were too precise, too regular, not the random chaos of system failure, but the deliberate precision of human intervention. Dr. Cross. His voice was quiet but urgent enough to cut through the celebration. Look at these timestamps. She leaned over his shoulder, scanning the data he'd highlighted. Her face went from triumphant to horrified in the space between heartbeats. Every corrupted file showed modification times at exactly 3:47 a.m. Not approximately, not within a few seconds, exactly down to the millisecond, as if someone had programmed the changes to occur simultaneously, and the pattern repeated backward in time. Same timestamp, different dates. 3:47 a.m. every single day for as far back as the logs extended. That's not system corruption. Dr. Cross's voice had gone flat, the tone of someone delivering news that would make everything worse. That's deliberate. Someone programmed this. Dante pulled up more files, following the trail through system architecture with growing certainty and dread. Each piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. The corruption wasn't accidental failure. It was sabotage planted systematically and activated on a schedule. Mr. Blackwood, Harrison's voice pulled Dante's attention from the screens. The CEO had positioned himself where he could see both Dante's face and the monitors reading disaster in both. Tell me what you've Dante stood legs unsteady from stress and depleted adrenaline. He turned his monitor so Harrison could see the timestamp pattern the evidence laid out in digital certainty. This wasn't a system failure. Someone with deep knowledge of your infrastructure planted corrupted validation files and programmed them to activate at precise intervals. Based on these logs, this has been happening for 6 years. The word sabotage didn't need to be spoken. It hung in the air between them, transforming relief into new varieties of panic. Harrison's face went through complicated emotions before settling on cold fury. 6 years. Someone has been compromising our systems for 6 years, and you never noticed because the corruption was subtle enough to avoid triggering alarms. Until today, when something changed in the activation parameters and the corruption cascaded into catastrophic failure. Dante pulled up another screen showing modification patterns. This wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to weaken you. Slowly create persistent instability that looked like normal technical problems. Bradford had gone pale, executive confidence evaporating as implications multiplied. If this has been happening for 6 years, who knows what else they've compromised? Dr. Cross was already running broader diagnostics, pulling logs from systems beyond the database infrastructure. Her expression suggested she wasn't liking what she found. "We need to lock down all server rooms immediately. No one in or out until we can verify who has legitimate access." Harrison's voice carried command authority, crisis management instincts engaging. "Dr. Cross, I want complete infrastructure audit. Every system, every access point, every line of code that's been modified in the past 6 years." He turned to Dante, assessment happening behind exhausted eyes. "Can you help us find whoever did this?" Dante thought about the rent notice, the eviction countdown, the $823.47 that wouldn't cover another week of survival. Thought about Zara believing her father was the best, Mrs. Hartwell's unwavering faith. Simone's voice in his memory saying, "Do what's right even when it's hard." Thought about walking away from the people who'd rejected him this morning, letting them solve their own problems with their own resources. But sabotage wasn't just technical failure. It was malicious, deliberate harm that would extend beyond core tech if left unexamined. Someone with this level of expertise and patience wouldn't stop at one target. "I can trace the patterns, find the signature in the code, identify who has the knowledge and access to accomplish something this sophisticated." Dante met Harrison's eyes directly. "But I need more than 5 minutes at a terminal." Harrison's response was immediate. "You're hired. Senior Systems Architect, $105,000 annual salary, full benefits effective immediately. $12,000 signing bonus available today." The numbers hit Dante like physical force. 105,000 meant security stability, the ability to pay rent and buy groceries without calculating whether they could afford both. 12,000 signing bonus meant the eviction notice became irrelevant, the countdown clock reset to 0. Meant his daughter's faith hadn't been misplaced. "Yes." The word came out rough with emotions Dante couldn't name. "Yes, I accept." The lobby erupted again, celebration of transformation rather than crisis resolution. Jason was shaking his hand. Dr. Cross smiled with genuine warmth. Even some consultants offered congratulations, professional enough to appreciate talent regardless of how it made them look. Harrison extended his hand, grip firm and meaningful. "Welcome to Core Tech, Mr. Blackwood. I'm sorry for how this morning went. That failure is on us, not you." Cassandra and Bradford stood apart from the celebration faces painted in humiliation. Cassandra's professional mask had cracked completely, revealing something that looked like shame fighting with defensive anger. Bradford just looked like someone calculating how this reflected on his own position. Harrison's attention shifted to them, expression hardening. "Ms. Sterling, Mr. Whitmore, my office. Now." They followed him toward the elevators, Cassandra's spine rigid and Bradford's jaw tight. Dante watched them go, feeling no triumph in their disgrace. Just exhausted relief that the morning's rejection had transformed into afternoon's vindication. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Hartwell, timestamp showing she'd sent it 20 minutes ago during the height of crisis. "Zara wanted me to tell you she knows you got the job because you're the smartest daddy in the whole world." Was she right? Dante's vision blurred. He typed back with shaking fingers. "Tell her she was absolutely right. Daddy got the job." The response was immediate. Multiple exclamation points, heart emojis, and a follow-up photo of Zara jumping on the couch with her arms in the air. Gap-toothed smile splitting her face with pure joy. Dr. Cross's hand touched his shoulder, gentle pressure acknowledging the emotional weight. "Take the rest of the day. Come back tomorrow and we'll start the investigation properly. You've earned time to process." But Dante shook his head, sliding his phone back into his pocket. "The saboteur knows their system failed. They'll be watching to see if you discovered the deliberate nature. If I leave now, they might panic and destroy evidence. I need to start documenting before the trail goes cold." Jason had returned to his terminal, already pulling up system access logs with enthusiasm of someone finally given permission to dig deep. "I can help. I've been here 3 years, know most of the architecture modifications." They worked through the afternoon, Dante and Jason forming efficient partnership despite having met 2 hours ago. The young engineer had instincts that matched his enthusiasm, able to anticipate what Dante needed before being asked. Together, they mapped the sabotage architecture, documenting 17 separate pieces of malicious code hidden throughout Cortex infrastructure. Each discovery made the scope more horrifying. Code designed to delete financial records under specific conditions, backdoors allowing external access to confidential communications, time bombs programmed to detonate during quarterly board meetings. The saboteur hadn't just wanted to damage Cortex, they'd wanted to destroy it systematically, piece by piece, over years. And the signature in the code was unmistakable once Dante knew what to look for. Specific variable naming conventions. Particular approaches to loop structures. The digital fingerprints of someone who'd developed their style over years and couldn't help leaving it embedded in everything they touched. Dante had seen this exact style before. Pull up employment records for anyone who worked on database infrastructure modifications in the past 7 years. His fingers were already moving to cross-reference code signatures against his memory of InnoData's systems. Jason brought up the personnel files, dozens of contractors and employees who'd touched the database during Cortex growth period. Dante scanned names looking for the one that would make everything click. There. Derek Vance. Lead programmer, database migration project 6 years ago. Contract duration 8 months. Termination reason, unauthorized access to confidential systems. The name triggered memories filed away and forgotten. Derek at InnoData, brilliant but paranoid, constantly complaining about being undervalued. Convinced every employer was exploiting him, stealing his ideas, planning to fire him the moment he became inconvenient. He'd been terminated from InnoData 6 months before Dante left. The official reason, unauthorized access to financial systems. At the time, it had seemed like minor policy violation. Now Dante saw the pattern. Derek being fired, nursing his grievance, using his final months of access to plant digital landmines. Waiting years for them to detonate, watching from distance as companies that wronged him suffered mysterious failures. I know him. Dante's voice was quiet but certain. Derek Vance. He worked at InnoData with me. Jason pulled up Derek's complete employment file, including exit interview and security logs from his final days at Cortex. The access patterns were damning. Late nights in server rooms, modifications to core infrastructure files with vague justification, deletion of security footage from 3 separate occasions during his last month. He was fired for unauthorized access. Jason highlighted the termination documentation. But it looks like they didn't investigate how extensively he'd compromised systems before they discovered the violation, because they thought they'd caught him early. Dante studied Derek's employee photo face that looked older than 35, suggested eyes holding the particular intensity of someone who took everything personally. They didn't realize they were terminating him after he'd already planted everything he needed. Dr. Cross had returned from whatever executive meeting had consumed her afternoon, approaching with coffee and sandwiches she distributed without asking if they wanted them. Her eyes tracked to the screens, reading Derek's file with practiced speed. Derek Vance. I remember his termination. IT Security found him accessing financial projection files he had no business viewing. He claimed he was trying to verify his own contract renewal prospects. She grimaced at the memory. Technically brilliant, but impossible to work with. Constantly filing grievances, accusing colleagues of stealing ideas. Did he work anywhere else after Cortex? Dante asked, already suspecting the answer. Jason's fingers flew across keyboard, pulling up employment databases and professional networking sites. 3 companies over the past 6 years. TechStream Solutions Data Flow Corporation System, Core Industries. Dante searched news archives for technical failures at those companies during relevant time frames. The pattern emerged with sickening clarity. Each company experienced mysterious system failures approximately 3 years after Derek's departure. Each failure looked like random corruption or inadequate infrastructure. None investigated deeply enough to discover deliberate sabotage. He's been doing this systematically. Dr. Cross's voice held horror and reluctant admiration. Plant the code, get fired, or leave, wait long enough that suspicion wouldn't naturally fall on him, then watch the companies burn. The question is whether this is revenge or something more calculated. Dante created a timeline mapping Derek's employment against system failures. If it's just revenge, he's satisfied watching companies suffer. But if there's financial motivation, we're looking at federal crimes beyond simple sabotage. The investigation consumed the next 3 weeks. Dante barely went home, surviving on coffee and focus that came from knowing every minute counted. Mrs. Hartwell took Zara more often than not, the neighbor's spare bedroom becoming Zara's second home, while her father chased patterns through digital architecture. He created comprehensive forensic analysis, 147 pages documenting every malicious code instance, every access pattern, every connection between Derek's employment and subsequent system failures. The report was complete enough for law enforcement, detailed enough to serve as legal evidence. Harrison promoted him to Chief Technology Officer in Week 4, the title coming with $125,000 salary and equity package that made the original offer look modest. Dante accepted without ceremony, too focused on finishing the investigation. By Week 5, they had everything. Complete documentation of Derek's methodology, access logs proving opportunity, code signatures establishing authorship, timeline connecting employment to disasters, expert testimony from Dr. Cross and 3 other database architects. Dante packaged it all into a report that would end Derek Vance's career and possibly send him to federal prison. Then he sent it to Harrison with recommendation they forward everything to law enforcement immediately. The response came 3 hours later. A package delivered to Cortex's main lobby addressed to Dante Blackwood in letters that looked laser-printed from a public library computer. Felix brought it to Dante's new office, expression carefully neutral, but eyes holding warning. This arrived at the front desk. No return address. Mail service says it bypassed normal delivery routes. Felix set the package on Dante's desk like it might detonate. "Want me to get bomb squad?" Dante's hands were already reaching for it, instinct overriding caution. The package was light envelope rather than box nothing, suggesting physical threat. Inside was a USB drive and a printed photograph. The photograph showed Zara on her school playground, taken yesterday, based on the outfit Dante recognized from breakfast. She was on the swings, hair flying back, completely unaware someone was photographing her from the parking lot beyond the fence. Dante's vision tunneled. His hands started shaking so hard he nearly dropped the picture. Felix moved closer, saw the photograph, and his expression went from neutral to murderous. That's threat. That's direct threat against a child. The printed note was brief and terrifying in its simplicity. "You should have stayed unemployed. Stop digging or your daughter learns what loss really means. Check the USB, then decide if exposing me is worth the price." Dante inserted the USB drive with hands that wanted to shake and didn't trust themselves. The video file was short. 30 seconds of Derek Vance's face features hidden behind digital distortion that made them swim like heat mirage. His voice came through modified, pitched down into ranges that sounded algorithmic. "You found my code." "Impressive, but you missed the point. I'm not done with core tech. I have access you'll never discover, because I built it into infrastructure you can't replace. Walk away, Blackwood, or the next package won't be a photograph." The video ended. Dante sat in his executive office staring at a photograph of his daughter and understanding that success had made him a target. Felix was already on his phone calling someone whose authority exceeded building security. "We need FBI. We need protection detail. We need this treated as the federal crime it is." But Dante barely heard him. He called Mrs. Hartwell with fingers that could barely hit the right buttons. She answered on the first ring. "Dante, is everything okay? Is Zara with you?" "Yes, she's doing homework at the kitchen table. Why, what's wrong?" "Lock all the doors and windows. Don't let her out of your sight. I'm calling a security company right now." Dante forced his voice to stay calm. "Someone threatened her. I need to know she's safe." Mrs. Hartwell's breathing changed, fear and fury mixing. "That child is the safest person in Seattle. I promise you, Dante, but you tell me who did this." "Derek Vance, former programmer. I'll send you his photo." Dante was already typing. "If you see him anywhere near Zara, call 911 immediately." "Dante." Mrs. Hartwell's voice had gone soft. "What are you going to do?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything it implied. Walk away. Let Derek escape, except that exposing him came with costs Dante couldn't afford to pay. Or continue forward, risk everything, including his daughter's safety. I don't know, I need to think. He ended the call and sat in silence, photograph of Zara on his desk next to the threatening note. The office that had felt like victory an hour ago felt like a trap. Felix had finished his calls. FBI sending someone within the hour. Seattle PD is putting patrol near your apartment and the school. Security company deploying to your address in 20 minutes. Dante nodded, processing information through the fog of terror and rage. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just tell me you're not going to let this bastard win. Felix's voice carried fury of someone who'd watched people threaten children before. You keep investigating. We keep your daughter safe. But Dante wasn't sure anymore. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. 24 hours to decide. Announce the investigation is closed or I escalate. Your choice, Daddy. Another buzz. This time from Zara's number, meaning Mrs. Hartwell had let her use the phone. Daddy. When are you coming home? Mrs. Hartwell says we're having a sleepover, but I want to see you. Did you catch the bad guy yet? Dante stared at his daughter's message until it blurred. 7 years old, and she already understood her father fought bad guys, solved problems, made things right. He thought about what he'd told her that morning about doing your best even when scared. Thought about whether he wanted Zara to learn that you fought for what was right or surrendered when the cost got too high. His hand steadied. The shaking stopped. Dante picked up his phone and called Harrison's direct line. We're not stopping the investigation. We're escalating it. FBI, Department of Justice, every agency with jurisdiction. Derek Vance is done. Today. Harrison's response came without hesitation. Whatever you need, whatever resources, we finish this. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Hartman arrived within the hour, bringing federal authority and resources that made Derek's threat look amateur. She reviewed Dante's 147-page report with focused intensity of someone who recognized prosecution-grade evidence. This is excellent work. Derek Vance isn't just looking at corporate sabotage charges, terroristic threatening across state lines. Computer fraud. We're talking federal prison 15 to 20 years. They built the case over 72 hours. The trail led to Portland, Oregon, an apartment where Derek had been living under his own name with the confidence of someone who'd never been caught before. Agent Hartman coordinated with Portland Field Office. We're executing arrest warrant tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., but Dante insisted on one modification. I want him to know who caught him. Let me call him first. Agent Hartman considered calculating risks against psychological impact. You wear a wire, we record everything, and you follow our script. That evening, Dante sat in Cortex conference room with FBI agents monitoring from the next room and dialed the number their investigation had uncovered. Derek answered on the third ring, voice cautious. Who is this? Dante Blackwood. We need to talk about your retirement plans. Silence, then nervous laugh. I gave you 24 hours to make a smart decision. Dante kept his voice level, professional. You planted 17 pieces of malicious code. I found all of them. Your architecture is comprehensive but not invisible. Derek's breathing changed. You're making a mistake. The FBI doesn't think so. Neither does the Department of Justice. Dante pulled up the arrest warrant. Portland Field Office is executing your arrest warrant at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Federal charges, corporate sabotage, computer fraud, terroristic threatening. Estimated sentence 15 to 20 years. You can't prove any of that. 147 pages of documentation suggests otherwise. Your code signatures are distinctive, Derek. You couldn't help leaving fingerprints. Dante paused. You threatened my daughter. That was your fatal mistake. Derek's voice went from nervous to panicked. I never touched your kid. Just felony terroristic threatening across state lines. Federal crime, Derek. The sound through the phone might have been a sob. I never meant for it to get this far. Then you should have chosen a less illegal method of processing grievances. Dante's voice held no sympathy. See you in court. I'll be testifying. He ended the call. Agent Hartman appeared in the doorway, giving thumbs up that suggested the recording had captured everything they needed. Derek was arrested without incident at 6:03 a.m. Portland time. The FBI's technical forensics recovered enough additional evidence from his apartment to add 3 more charges. Dante went home that evening for the first time in 4 days. Mrs. Hartwell had Zara fed and bathed and ready for bed the 7-year-old fighting sleep because she wanted to hear about her father catching bad guys. He read her 3 chapters, watched her eyes grow heavy, and tucked her in with the purple blanket. "Daddy!" Zara's voice was sleep-blurred. "Did you catch the bad guy?" "Yes, baby girl, he's caught. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Because you're the smartest daddy in the whole world." Not a question. Statement of fact. He kissed her forehead, throat too tight for words. "Because I have you. That makes everything else possible." She smiled and drifted into sleep, safe and certain in ways that had cost Dante everything and given him more than he'd imagined possible. The media storm broke within hours of Derek's arrest. Dante's phone became unusable notifications flooding in faster than he could dismiss them. Interview requests from NPR, TechCrunch, Wired, local Seattle stations, national networks. Everyone wanted the story of the unemployed single father who'd saved a company and exposed a 6-year sabotage campaign in the same morning. He declined them all, let the story spread through official channels, FBI press releases, and Cortex communications team. His focus belonged to work that still needed finishing evidence, requiring documentation systems demanding auditing for vulnerabilities Derek might have exploited beyond the 17 pieces they'd already found. The federal prosecutor assigned to Derek's case was a woman named Margaret Chen, 30 years with the DOJ, and a reputation for treating corporate crime with the seriousness it deserved. She arrived at Cortex 3 days after the arrest, briefcase full of questions and legal pads ready for answers. Dante spent 8 hours walking her through his 147-page report explaining technical details in language that would survive courtroom cross-examination. Margaret took notes in handwriting so neat it looked typeset, occasionally stopping him to clarify points that would matter to a jury. "This is prosecution gold." She tapped the section detailing Derek's signature coding patterns. "Expert testimony from you and Dr. Cross combined with digital forensics our team recovered from his apartment makes this essentially airtight. What's the timeline for trial?" Margaret's expression suggested she'd been through this enough times to predict outcomes. "He'll take a plea deal. 20 years of evidence, multiple federal charges, your documentation removing any reasonable doubt. His public defender will recommend pleading guilty in exchange for reduced sentencing." "How reduced?" 15 years instead of 25. Maybe 12 with cooperation and good behavior. Margaret closed her notebook with finality. Derek Vance's career is over. His freedom is over. Justice will be served. The word justice felt complicated. Dante understood satisfaction of consequences, delivered threats, neutralized danger, removed from the world. But 15 years in federal prison seemed simultaneously inadequate for what Derek had done, and excessive for crimes involving code rather than physical violence. He thought about Zara's photograph taken from a parking lot while she played innocently on swings. Thought about the violation implicit in that image. Thought about whether 15 years was enough to balance that particular scale. Decided it didn't matter what he thought. The legal system would process Derek according to its own logic, and Dante's role was providing evidence rather than determining punishment. Derek Vance pleaded guilty 6 weeks later to 4 federal charges: corporate sabotage, computer fraud, terroristic threatening, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for at least 12. The courtroom was packed with representatives from all 4 companies he'd sabotaged, watching the man who'd tried to destroy them get led away in handcuffs. Dante attended the sentencing with Harrison and Dr. Cross. He felt no triumph watching Derek shuffle out in orange jumpsuit and chains. Just weary closure, the final chapter of a story that had consumed 6 weeks of his life. Outside the courthouse, Margaret Chen shook his hand one final time. "You built a case that made conviction inevitable. The FBI wants to hire you as a consultant for future corporate sabotage investigations. Dante declined politely. He had other work that mattered more. Cortex's response to the crisis was swift and comprehensive. Harrison called an all-hands meeting 48 hours after Derek's plea deal. Every employee crammed into the cafeteria because no conference room could hold 500 people simultaneously. The CEO stood on a makeshift stage looking older than he had 2 months ago, but steadier, like someone who'd survived catastrophe and emerged with clarity about what mattered. 6 years ago, we made a hiring decision that nearly destroyed this company. We brought in a contractor who seemed brilliant, gave him access to our infrastructure, and failed to properly vet his background or monitor his activities. Harrison paused, letting the words settle into uncomfortable silence. 2 months ago, we made a different kind of mistake. We rejected a candidate in an interview process that prioritized assumptions over qualifications. We let bias prevent us from seeing exceptional talent because it came in a package that didn't match our narrow expectations. His eyes found Dante in the crowd, acknowledgement that made 500 heads turn. Dante Blackwood saved us. Not just from Derek Vance's sabotage, but from our own failure to recognize value when it didn't conform to comfortable patterns. He did this after we rejected him, after we questioned his commitment because he's a single father, after we decided he wasn't suitable for our company culture. Cassandra Sterling stood near the back face, painted in shades of humiliation that would have been satisfying if Dante had energy left for satisfaction. Bradford Whitmore shifted his weight beside her, discomfort visible across the crowded room. Effective immediately, we're implementing comprehensive hiring reform. Harrison's voice carried the weight of non-negotiable decision. Blind resume screening to eliminate name-based bias. Standardized interview protocols with mandatory duration minimums. Statistical monitoring of hiring patterns with quarterly audits. And zero tolerance for cultural fit objections that can't be substantiated with specific job-relevant criteria. The cafeteria erupted in applause, though Dante noticed pockets of resistance scattered throughout the crowd. Change was never universally welcome, especially change that challenged comfortable assumptions about who belonged. The answer to Cassandra and Bradford's fate came after the meeting. Harrison summoned both of them to his office, along with Dr. Cross and the head of HR operations. Jason, who'd become Dante's unofficial intelligence source, provided details afterward. Cassandra's out, terminated effective immediately, no severance beyond contract mandates. Harrison gave her 2 choices: resign quietly with neutral reference or be fired with documentation of discriminatory hiring practices. Dante absorbed this while reviewing system security logs. Which did she choose? Resignation. But Harrison made clear he'd be contacting other tech companies' HR departments personally if he learned she'd secured another position in Seattle. Jason's expression suggested complicated feelings about witnessing career destruction. She's blacklisted, not formally, but word will spread. Bradford's fate was more nuanced, protected by family connection, but damaged by association. Harrison demoted him from VP of Technology to senior manager position, stripping authority while maintaining employment. The move sent messages about accountability while avoiding messy complications of firing his own son. Dante felt no triumph in their consequences. Just weary recognition that systems changed slowly, required public failures before private biases could be addressed. Cassandra and Bradford were symptoms rather than disease products of an industry that had taught them to screen candidates through filters they'd never examined. The calls started coming from other companies Derek had sabotaged. TechStream Solutions, Dataflow Corporation, System, Core Industries. All 3 reached out within the week, requesting Dante's expertise in auditing their systems for similar compromises. He declined the consulting offers but agreed to share his methodology, the forensic approach he'd developed for identifying Derek's signature patterns. The document he created became known as the Blackwood Protocol systematic process for detecting long-term sabotage in enterprise systems. Within 3 months, 12 companies had adopted it as standard security practice. Within 6 months, The methodology appeared in cybersecurity textbooks and professional certification exams. Dante's approach to pattern recognition in malicious code became industry standard, his name attached to techniques that would outlast his career. The irony wasn't lost on him. 8 months ago, 13 companies had rejected him as unsuitable. Now his methods were being taught to their security teams as best practice. Harrison appointed him Chief Technology Officer in month 2 promotion, coming with equity package that made the signing bonus look modest. Dante accepted the title and immediately used authority to implement security reforms that went beyond Derek's specific vulnerabilities. He rebuilt Cortex infrastructure from foundation upward, not because everything was compromised, but because thorough was better than sorry. Hired 20 new engineers prioritizing candidates from non-traditional backgrounds who'd been screened out by old hiring processes. Created mentorship programs pairing senior developers with junior talent knowledge transfer, replacing gatekeeping. The statistics spoke for themselves within 6 months. Black employee percentage rose from 3 to 34%. Latino representation climbed from 5 to 18. Women in technical roles doubled. Retention rates jumped 45% as people who'd been considering leaving decided to stay and see what the new core tech might become. Company revenue increased 28% correlation. That wasn't causation, but suggested diverse perspectives produced better products and stronger decision-making. Dante presented these numbers at board meetings with the same calm certainty he'd brought to fixing Derek's sabotage, letting data make arguments that opinion couldn't refute. Personal life transformed in parallel with professional success. The signing bonus became down payment on a townhouse in Columbia City, 3 bedrooms and a small yard where Zara could play without apartment building restrictions. The mortgage was higher than his old rent, but affordable meant something different attached to $125,000 annual salary. Mrs. Hartwell helped them move her practical wisdom, preventing rookie homeowner mistakes, like forgetting to change locks or test smoke detectors. She walked through each room, offering commentary ranging from approval to suggestions for improvement, claiming the guest bedroom as her designated sleepover space without asking if that was acceptable. Zara explored the house with methodical thoroughness of a 7-year-old mapping new territory. She claimed the bedroom with the window seat, already planning where books would go, and which wall deserved her growing collection of drawings. "Can we get a dog now?" The question came approximately 40 seconds after they'd signed closing papers, as if Zara had been waiting for legal ownership before making her request. Dante had promised maybe for 8 months, the non-committal response of parents buying time while circumstances improved. But circumstances had improved. The house had a yard. His schedule had stabilized into predictable rhythms. "Yes, we can get a dog." Zara's shriek probably violated noise ordinances. She launched herself at Dante with the force of someone who'd been holding this dream through months of uncertainty, arms wrapping around his waist and squeezing hard enough to make breathing difficult. They adopted Lucky 3 weeks later from a rescue shelter in Renton. Mixed breed, brown and scruffy, approximately 2 years old based on veterinarian's estimate. The shelter staff explained she'd been found wandering I-5 no collar or identification friendly, but skittish in ways suggesting abandonment rather than escape. Zara knelt in front of the kennel fingers, reaching through chain link, while Lucky approached with cautious interest. Their eyes met connection happening in that wordless way animals and children sometimes managed. This is our dog." The shelter volunteer smiled with knowing expression of someone who'd witnessed this process hundreds of times. "She's a sweet girl, been here 3 months waiting for the right family." Dante completed adoption paperwork while Zara sat on the floor letting Lucky climb into her lap, despite being too large to actually fit. The dog's tail wagged with gradually increasing enthusiasm, fear giving way to recognition that these humans meant safety. "Why Lucky?" Dante asked as they loaded the dog into his car. His daughter's answer came with serious wisdom that periodically emerged from her 7-year-old perspective. "Because she was lost and now she's found. Because someone threw her away and we picked her up. Because she's lucky we found each other. The logic was sound in ways that extended beyond dog naming. Dante looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, at the rescue dog already settling against her, at the house they were driving toward that represented stability. He'd stopped believing possible, decided lucky was exactly the right word for all of them. The scholarship fund emerged from a conversation with Harrison 6 months into Dante's tenure as CTO. They were reviewing quarterly results numbers, showing continued growth and improved performance metrics, when the CEO shifted topics without warning. "I want to do something meaningful with the money we saved by not paying Derek's sabotage costs. Something that addresses the systemic problem your hiring exposed." Dante waited, understanding that Harrison was working through an idea rather than asking permission. "We almost missed you because our screening process was designed to reject anyone who didn't fit narrow parameters. How many other talented people are we missing across the industry because they're being screened out before they get chances to prove themselves?" The question was rhetorical, but Dante answered anyway. Hundreds. Probably thousands. Single parents, people from non-traditional educational backgrounds, candidates who interview poorly but engineer brilliantly. The system filters for conformity and calls it quality control. So we create an alternative path. Scholarship fund targeting kids from single-parent households who want to pursue STEM careers, not based on perfect grades or standardized test scores, but on demonstrated passion and potential. Harrison pulled up spreadsheet already populated with preliminary numbers. $5 million endowment, 50 scholarships first year. The scope made Dante's breath catch. $5 million could change lives, create opportunities, prove that talent existed everywhere if you looked beyond comfortable assumptions. "I want to name it after Simone." Harrison's voice had gone soft, acknowledging personal dimension underlying professional discussion. "Your wife. The woman who raised Zara for her first 3 years and gave you the foundation that made everything else possible. The Simone Blackwood Memorial Scholarship." Dante's throat closed completely. He managed to nod, unable to trust his voice for actual words. Simone had died believing her family would survive without her trusting Dante to provide stability and love. This scholarship would ensure her name became associated with helping other families navigate the same impossible challenges. Yes, she would have loved that. The scholarship program launched in month 8 application process designed to identify passion rather than perfection. Essays asking what problem candidates wanted to solve and why it mattered. Recommendations from teachers or mentors who'd watched students overcome obstacles. Evidence of curiosity and persistence rather than straight A transcripts. The first cohort included 50 students' backgrounds spanning from inner-city Seattle to rural Washington towns where opportunities were limited by geography and economics. Dante met each recipient personally, shared his own story of rejection and redemption. Offered mentorship to anyone who wanted it. 5 students took him up on the offer. Within 6 months, all 5 were interning at CoreTech, learning professional software engineering from teams who'd learned to value potential over pedigree. One recipient was a 16-year-old girl named Rosa Martinez from Yakima, whose single mother worked 3 jobs. Rosa had taught herself Python through library computers and YouTube tutorials. Her essay was rough grammar imperfect, but passion blazed through every sentence. Dante called her personally to deliver the news. Her scream of joy through the phone made him smile for the rest of the day. The conference invitation arrived in month 10, email from the National Technology Leadership Conference, organizing committee, requesting Dante as keynote speaker for their annual summit. 3,000 expected attendees livestream, reaching 500,000 more platform to discuss innovation and leadership and whatever message he wanted to deliver. Dante almost declined. Public speaking had never been his strength, and the thought of 3,000 people evaluating his every word triggered anxiety he'd rather avoid. But the invitation specifically mentioned his story, the journey from rejection to vindication to systemic change. He consulted Zara, whose opinion mattered more than professional advancement. She was 8 now, old enough to understand that her father's speech would be watched by people across the country. Are you going to tell them the truth about how they were wrong and you were right? Something like that. Then you should do it. Because maybe someone watching needs to hear that being wrong about somebody doesn't mean that person isn't amazing. Zara's wisdom landed with force of revelation disguised as childhood logic. Dante accepted the invitation. The preparation consumed weeks. He wrote multiple versions of the speech, each attempting to balance truth with diplomacy, honesty with hope, criticism with constructive vision. Mrs. Hartwell listened to every draft, offering feedback ranging from gentle suggestion to blunt assessment that particular passages sounded preachy. Tell your story. Don't explain it. Don't justify it. Don't apologize for making people uncomfortable. Just tell the truth and let them sit with whatever feelings that creates. The final version was simple. Chronological narrative starting with the 14th interview and ending with scholarship fund announcement. No accusations, no anger, just documentation of what had happened and what it meant for an industry that claimed to value meritocracy while practicing discrimination. The conference was scheduled for early December, Seattle Convention Center downtown. Dante flew in the night before, leaving Zara with Mrs. Hartwell and Lucky, with specific instructions about bedtime and homework. The hotel room was too quiet, leaving him alone with nerves that manifested as rehearsal he'd already done dozens of times. He pulled out his phone, reviewing the text exchange with Zara from earlier. "Good luck tomorrow, Daddy. Remember, you're the best and everyone's going to know it." The message came with photo attachment. Zara holding up her original good luck card from the morning of his core tech interview, now laminated and preserved. Dante smiled and sent back, "Love you, baby girl. See you tomorrow night." Sleep was elusive, arriving in fragments between anxiety and anticipation. When morning came, it felt simultaneously too soon and long overdue. The conference hall was exactly as overwhelming as he'd feared. 3,000 seats rising in tiered rows, professional lighting designed to make the stage feel like the center of the universe. Backstage, the organizing committee ran through logistics with brisk efficiency. Dr. Cross appeared 15 minutes before his scheduled start time, her presence grounding in ways the organizing committee's professionalism wasn't. "You're going to be brilliant. These people need to hear what you have to say, even the ones who don't want to." The introduction was generous to the point of embarrassment, listing accomplishments that made him sound like someone else entirely. Chief Technology Officer at Cortex Systems, developer of the Blackwood Protocol, creator of the Simone Blackwood Memorial Scholarship. Applause rolled through the auditorium as Dante walked onto the stage, 3,000 people rising to their feet. He reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and waited for noise to settle into expectant silence. And there in row 17, far right, sat Cassandra Sterling. Arms crossed initially, but something in her posture had changed since this morning. She looked like someone who'd come expecting to be uncomfortable and had made peace with that expectation. Their eyes met briefly. What passed between them wasn't quite forgiveness, but acknowledged shared history and the possibility that people could learn from failures. Dante's hands found the podium edges, anchoring himself. The teleprompter displayed his opening lines, but he'd memorized them weeks ago. "Thank you for that introduction. They asked me to speak today about innovation in corporate leadership, about crisis management and technological solutions." He let the pause stretch. "But I want to tell you about the morning I became invisible." The speech unfolded exactly as he'd practiced. He told his story without embellishment or apology. Showed his documentation, the notebook pages projected 30 feet high. Showed the statistical analysis proving systematic rejection. Explained how Cortex Crisis had become his breakthrough. How Derek's sabotage had led to industry-wide security reforms. How one company's willingness to change had created ripples affecting thousands of careers. He talked about the scholarship fund, about Rosa Martinez and 49 other students whose talent had been invisible to systems designed to screen them out. Showed photographs of recipients, their faces representing diversity the tech industry claimed to value but rarely achieved. The question I'm asking all of you is simple. How many are you missing? How many talented people are being screened out by hiring processes designed to confirm biases rather than discover capability? The silence had weight, discomfort thick enough to feel. His final words were delivered with certainty, earned through experience. To the young people watching, you are not your circumstances. To the parents struggling, your children see your fight. It matters. To the hiring managers, look harder, see deeper. We're here. The auditorium erupted. 3,000 people on their feet, applause thundering through the space. Dante stood at the podium watching the ovation, searching for Cassandra in the crowd and finding her standing with everyone else, face wet with tears she wasn't trying to hide. The reception line lasted 90 minutes. One woman approached near the end, 50s well-dressed, carrying herself with authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. "I'm Patricia Williams, CEO of DataStream Industries." She extended her hand. "Your speech made me very uncomfortable." Dante returned the handshake, unsure whether this was criticism or compliment. That was somewhat intentional. Good. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Patricia pulled out her business card. "I want to hire you as consultant. Review our hiring practices. Identify where we're making the same mistakes CoreTech made." The card was heavy stock embossed lettering, suggesting success and resources. Dante slipped it into his pocket. "Don't thank me. Send me an invoice." Patricia's smile held steel beneath warmth. "You've built something important. Don't let it stay contained to one company." She left him with that challenge, disappearing into the dispersing crowd while Dante processed the implication. His reforms at CoreTech could become template for industry-wide change if he was willing to expand beyond comfortable boundaries. 2 months later, Dante sat in his CoreTech office reviewing the metrics that would be presented at tomorrow's board meeting. The numbers told their own story. Employee satisfaction up 47%, retention at industry-leading levels, revenue growth outpacing competitors, scholarship fund expanded to 100 recipients for the coming year. His phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line, "Scholarship Recipient Update, Rosa Martinez." Dante opened it, reading the message from Rosa's mentor at her internship. "Wanted you to know Rosa just submitted a pull request that solved a database optimization problem our senior team had been struggling with for 3 weeks. Her approach was so elegant, we're implementing it across all our systems. She's remarkable, and she credits the scholarship for making this opportunity possible." Dante forwarded the email to Harrison with a simple note. "This is why it matters." The response came back immediately. "Agreed. Expanding the fund to 150 scholarships next year. Board approved this morning." He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window at Seattle's skyline. The same view he'd had for 10 months now, but it never stopped feeling surreal. Chief Technology Officer, industry leader in security protocols, creator of scholarship fund that would help hundreds of families, all because he'd refused to accept rejection as final verdict. His office door opened without warning. Zara burst in, Mrs. Hartwell trailing behind with apologetic expression. "Sorry, Dante," she insisted. "It's okay." He waved off the apology, already moving around his desk to catch his daughter. "What are you doing here, baby girl?" Zara held up a piece of paper, bouncing with excitement that could barely be contained. "I got my report card, all A's, even in math." Dante lifted her up despite her being almost too big for it now, 8 years old and growing faster than he could process. "That's my brilliant girl. I'm so proud of you. Mrs. Hartwell said we could bring it to show you at work because you're the boss and bosses can see their kids whenever they want." Zara's logic was unassailable. Mrs. Hartwell smiled from the doorway. She was very insistent. Also, she wanted to see your fancy office. Zara wiggled down and immediately began exploring, touching the awards CoreTech had given him, examining the photographs on his desk. She stopped at one in particular, Dante and Zara on the day they'd adopted Lucky, both of them grinning at the camera while the dog licked their faces. "This one's my favorite." She picked up the frame carefully. "Because it's when we became a real family. You, me, and Lucky." Dante's throat tightened. "We were always a real family, sweetheart." "I know, but this is when we got to be a happy family, not just a trying really hard family." Her 8-year-old wisdom cut straight to truth. "You smile different now, like you're not worried all the time." Mrs. Hartwell caught his eye, her expression suggesting she'd noticed the same transformation. Zara set down the photograph and turned to face him, suddenly serious, in the way children got when processing big thoughts. "Daddy, do you remember that card I made you, the good luck one?" "Of course. I still have it. Right here." Dante pulled open his desk drawer, removing the laminated card he'd carried to 14 interviews and beyond. "Why?" "Because I was right." She said it with absolute certainty, no pride or arrogance, just statement of observable fact. "I said you were the best and everyone would know it, and now they do." Dante knelt down to her, level hands on her shoulders. "You know what the real magic was. Not that you were right, but that you believed it even when I didn't. That belief kept me going when I wanted to give up." "I know." Zara's gap-toothed smile, adult teeth still coming in slowly, was pure sunshine. "That's what families do. They believe in each other even when it's hard." She hugged him with the fierce intensity of 8-year-olds who hadn't yet learned to be reserved with affection. Dante held her close, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood, and all the things that had made every rejection and struggle worthwhile. When she pulled back, her expression had shifted to practical matters. "Can we get ice cream on the way home to celebrate my report card?" "Absolutely." "And can Lucky come?" Dante laughed. "Lucky always comes. She's part of the family, too." They left his office together, Dante carrying Zara on his shoulders through Cortex halls while Mrs. Hartwell walked beside them. Employees smiled as they passed, some offering congratulations on Zara's report card, others just acknowledging the CTO who'd made this company feel like a place where people mattered beyond their productivity metrics. Felix was at his security post near the main entrance, having been promoted to head of security 3 months ago. He gave Dante a respectful nod, then broke into genuine smile seeing Zara on his shoulders. "Young Miss Blackwood, I hear congratulations are in order." Zara beamed. "All A's, even math." "That's because you're brilliant, like your father." Felix looked at Dante with the particular respect of someone who'd witnessed transformation firsthand. "You heading out for celebration?" "Ice cream," Dante confirmed. "The cornerstone of all major academic achievements." "As it should be." They pushed through the doors into December afternoon, Seattle's characteristic drizzle making everything shimmer, but not quite qualifying as rain. Dante's car, new Honda SUV that actually started on the first try and had working heat, was parked in the executive section he still wasn't quite used to occupying. As he buckled Zara into the back seat, his phone buzzed one more time. Email from the National Technology Leadership Conference. "Mr. Blackwood, we've received 847 requests from attendees asking for copies of your presentation and information about implementing similar reforms at their companies. Would you be willing to consult on industry-wide hiring practice improvements?" Dante read the message twice, processing implications that extended far beyond Cortex walls. His story had reached people. His reforms were being adopted. The scholarship bearing Simone's name was creating opportunities for families who needed them most. Everything he'd built from rejection and determination was becoming something larger than himself. He looked at Zara in the rearview mirror, already chattering to Mrs. Hartwell about her plans for ice cream flavors and whether Lucky would prefer vanilla or chicken-flavored treats. His daughter, who'd believed in him when belief required faith more than evidence, who'd made him a card that launched everything. Dante started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward the ice cream shop and the evening ahead and the life they'd built from $823 and a 7-year-old's unwavering certainty. The man who'd been invisible had become undeniable. The father who'd been unsuitable had become invaluable. The candidate who'd been rejected 14 times had created a legacy that would outlast any single career. And somewhere in heaven, Simone was watching her family thrive, her name helping other families find their own paths from struggle to stability, her memory transforming pain into purpose for hundreds of children who would never know her, but would benefit from the love she'd left behind. Dante Blackwood had been told he wasn't good enough. He'd proved them wrong, not through anger or revenge, but by being exactly who his daughter always believed him to be, the best.